The laughter hit first. Not polite laughter, not nervous laughter, the kind that spreads across a room like fire. Adewale Okonkwo stood frozen at the front of the conference room, his fingers tightening around a cheap plastic clicker as men in tailored suits leaned back in their chairs, shaking their heads. One of them wiped his eyes as if he just heard the best joke of the year. "You're serious?" someone asked, still smiling. Ade swallowed. "Yes," he said, "this system can work." Another man laughed louder. "Work where?" "Across Africa," Ade replied. That was when the room truly lost control. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Another whispered, "Delusional." A third leaned forward and said it out loud, slow and sharp, like he wanted it to sting. "Do you know how things work here?" Ade opened his mouth to respond, but the man cut him off. "Cash is king. People don't trust systems. Governments don't cooperate. And you want us to believe you're going to connect street vendors, banks, and regulators on cheap phones with bad internet?" The laughter returned, louder than before. Ade felt heat rush to his face, but he stayed standing. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't walk out. He simply looked at them and said, quietly, "Because they already depend on it. They just don't know it yet." The room went silent for half a second. Then someone clapped sarcastically. That meeting ended 3 minutes later. B-roll. Conference room emptying. Chairs scraping. Ade standing alone. Before the story continues, pause for just a second. If you enjoy stories about underestimated ideas, quiet persistence, and people who refuse to quit when the world laughs at them, hit the subscribe button now. You don't want to miss what happens next. Ade walked out of the building into the afternoon heat, Lagos traffic roaring around him. Horns blared, conductors shouted. A hawker brushed past him yelling prices. Life continued, indifferent to rejection. He stood on the sidewalk staring at his reflection in the glass doors behind him. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe they were right. But doubt had followed Ade his entire life. He grew up in a 2-room apartment where the generator only worked when fuel money existed. Every night, his mother sat at a wooden table, emptying a small tin filled with crumpled notes and coins. She never counted profit. She counted survival. Some nights she smiled. Most nights she sighed. "Tomorrow will be better," she would say, folding the money carefully. Sometimes customers paid on time. Sometimes promises replaced cash. "Next week," they'd say. "By month end. God will help us." Electricity came and went like a visitor who overstayed his welcome. Records were written in notebooks that tore, faded, and disappeared. Trust wasn't built on systems. It was built on memory. And memory failed. As a child, Ade watched arguments break out over missing payments. He watched suppliers refuse credit. He watched his mother lose customers because she couldn't prove who owed what. Years later, sitting in a crowded university lecture hall with flickering lights overhead, Ade noticed something his classmates didn't. The problem wasn't laziness. The problem wasn't lack of ambition. The problem was fragmentation. People were trading. People were paying. People were building businesses. But everything existed in isolation. No shared records. No shared identity. No shared trust layer. During a group assignment, a classmate laughed when Ade suggested building a unified transaction system. "For who?" the boy asked. "The village?" Ade didn't respond. At night, he stayed back in the lab, sketching diagrams on scrap paper. He imagined a system that worked on basic phones, a system that didn't require constant internet, a system flexible enough for informal markets but strong enough for banks. A single digital spine connecting millions of small transactions into something reliable. He didn't dream of being rich. He dreamed of order. When he finally built a rough prototype, he showed it to his friends. One stared at the screen and shook his head. "This is too big." Another laughed. "No one will trust this." A third said, "You're wasting your time. Build something simpler." Ade listened. Then he kept building. After graduation, reality arrived fast. Job applications disappeared into silence. Interview panels asked about practical experience. Bills didn't wait for ambition. One evening, his father sat across from him, voice low. "You are smart," he said, "but smart people still need jobs." Ade nodded. "I know. So what is this thing you're building?" "A system," Ade replied. His father frowned. "Systems are for governments, not boys without connections." That night, Ade stared at his laptop screen until dawn, rewriting code that barely ran. He applied for grants, he emailed investors, he begged accelerators for meetings. Most never replied. The few who did smiled politely and said no. One investor leaned forward during a pitch and said something Ade would never forget. "If this idea was good," the man said, tapping the table, "it wouldn't come from here." Ade felt something inside him harden. Not anger, resolve. Money dried up. Friends moved on. Co-founders drifted away. One morning, Ade sold his laptop to pay rent. 3 weeks later, he borrowed money and bought it back. 2 months after that, he sold it again. He worked from cyber cafes, headphones cracked, keyboards sticky, generator noise drowning his thoughts. B-roll, dim cyber cafe, flickering screen, generator smoke. When the cafe closed, he slept in an unfinished building nearby, wrapping himself in his jacket, listening to rats scurry through concrete shadows. There were no interviews, no features, no validation. Just small improvements no one noticed. While people laughed loudly, he worked quietly. Then came the first real test, a pilot launch with local merchants. The system crashed. Transactions failed. Merchants complained. One woman shouted, "You've wasted my time." A partner pulled out the same day. Ave sat alone in his room staring at error logs until his eyes burned. His phone buzzed with missed calls he didn't return. He opened his email and typed a message addressed to himself. "I'm done." He didn't send it. That night, his mother called. Her voice crackled through the line. "How is your work?" Ade hesitated. "Hard." She laughed softly. "Hard things usually matter." He told her about the failure, the mockery, the money. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "If they're laughing, it means you're doing something new." Ade closed his eyes. "I don't know if I can continue." "You can," she said simply. "You have always continued." He deleted the email and rewrote the system again. Months passed. Then came the tension no one expected. A regional crisis. Cash movement slowed. Borders tightened. Banks struggled to reconcile transactions across states. Merchants couldn't move money safely. Governments scrambled for temporary fixes. In a quiet office, someone remembered Ade's system. "Didn't that boy build something like this?" a banker asked. "It's rough, but it works," another replied. They called him. Ade thought it was a joke at first. "Are you serious?" he asked. "We need something now," the voice said. "Can you deploy?" Ade didn't celebrate. He worked. The system wasn't perfect, but it held. Merchants adopted it out of necessity. Banks integrated it quietly. Cross-border traders relied on it because nothing else functioned fast enough. Usage exploded, not because of marketing, but because survival demanded it. One night, Ade watched the transaction counter roll upward, numbers climbing faster than he could process. He whispered, "It's working." But success brought a new problem: power. Officials wanted control. Banks wanted exclusivity. Competitors wanted access. A government representative leaned across a desk and said, "You need us." Ade met his gaze. "They need the system." The man smiled thinly. "Careful." Pressure mounted. Threats came quietly. Offers came loudly. Ade refused interviews. He refused shortcuts. He refused to sell control because he remembered the laughter. Today, his platform processes billions. Banks depend on it. Governments embed it. Businesses rely on it. And the world that once laughed now sends meeting requests that go unanswered. If this story is resonating with you, pause right now and hit like. Comment where you're watching from. Stories like this deserve to travel. Ade never says, "I told you so." He doesn't need to, because his system speaks for him. The night Ade realized the world had started depending on his system, he didn't celebrate. He sat alone in a dimly lit room, laptop balanced on his knees, watching transaction logs stream endlessly down the screen. Each line represented someone paying for food, settling a debt, moving money across borders without fear. Billions of tiny decisions, billions of quiet dependencies. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He let it ring. It buzzed again, then again. Finally, he answered. "We need a meeting," the voice said, smooth and confident. "Urgently." Ade didn't respond. "This is bigger than you," the voice continued. "You've built something powerful. Powerful things attract attention." "I didn't build it for attention," Ade replied. A pause. "Then you built it for control," the voice said. "And control invites consequences." The line went dead. Ade stared at the phone, heart pounding. This was the tension no one warned him about. Not failure, success. The next morning, headlines appeared quietly. Not about him, but about the system. A new digital backbone emerges across regional markets. No name mentioned, no founder credited. Banks called it an internal solution. Governments called it a temporary framework. Ade watched from the shadows as his creation spread faster than any pitch deck ever could. But with growth came resistance. Competitors accused him of monopolizing access. Regulators demanded oversight. Politicians questioned motives. At one closed-door meeting, a senior official leaned forward and said, "You must understand something. Systems don't exist outside power." Ede looked around the room. Men in suits, air conditioning humming, security at the door. "People already trust it," Ade said calmly. "That's the power." The official smiled. "Trust can be redirected." That night, Ade didn't sleep. He remembered the unfinished building, the cyber cafes, the laughter. He wasn't about to lose control now. Instead of fighting publicly, Ade did what he always did. He built. He strengthened encryption, decentralized access points, distributed control. He made the system harder to own, but easier to use. A quiet rebellion written in code. Months passed. Usage doubled, then tripled. Merchants began refusing cash entirely. Banks redesigned services around his infrastructure. Governments embedded it into identity systems, without announcements, without ceremonies, without applause. One afternoon, Ade walked past a roadside vendor paying a supplier using a basic phone. No apps, no explanations, just trust. Ade stopped walking. He watched the transaction complete in seconds. The vendor smiled and went back to work. Ade felt something tighten in his chest. This was it. Not wealth, impact. But the biggest test was still coming. A global disruption hit. Supply chains stalled. Currencies fluctuated. Digital systems failed under pressure. International platforms buckled. Ade's system didn't, because it wasn't built for perfection. It was built for reality. Governments that once ignored him now relied on his infrastructure to stabilize markets. International institutions requested emergency integrations. One executive said during a call, "We didn't think it would scale like this." Ade replied quietly, "Neither did you." Behind the scenes, numbers skyrocketed. Billions processed daily, then trillions. At that point, the media could no longer ignore him. Journalists searched for the founder. Profiles were drafted. Stories were written. Ade declined every interview because he knew something most people didn't. The story wasn't about him. It was about the idea they laughed at. At a private dinner, one of the same investors who mocked him years earlier raised a glass. "To vision," the man said. "We misjudged you." Ade didn't raise his glass. "I wasn't asking to be judged. I was asking to be understood." The table went silent. Later that night, Ade stood alone on a balcony, overlooking a city powered by his work. Lights flickered, traffic flowed, transactions moved invisibly beneath it all. He remembered standing in that conference room years ago. The laughter, the dismissal, the certainty that he didn't belong. Now, the world moved differently because he refused to quit. If you're still watching this story, pause for a moment. Ask yourself how many ideas you've buried because someone laughed. If this resonates, like the video and leave a comment. Stories like this grow when people share them. Aden never announced his net worth, but quietly, he crossed a threshold few ever reach. Billionaire. Not from hype, not from shortcuts, from solving a problem big enough that the world had no choice but to depend on it. One evening, his mother visited his office for the first time. She looked around at the screens, the maps, the flowing data. "So this is what you were building," she said. Ade smiled. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "They are using it." "Yes." She looked at him, eyes soft. "Good. Then it was worth it." That was the only validation he ever needed. Today, Ade walks freely, unrecognized by most. But every time someone taps a phone, every time money moves safely, every time trust exists without paper, his idea is there. The world may not know his name, but it depends on his work. And that is the quiet victory of those who build what others laugh at. Because every global solution was once mocked, not because it was wrong, but because it was early. Mockery is often the sound of limits being exposed. Ade didn't chase money. He chased a problem. And when you solve a problem big enough, the world follows. They mocked his idea. Now, the world depends on it. If this story inspired you, subscribe for more cinematic success stories like this. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments, what idea are you being laughed at for right now? The next story might be yours.